Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on this platform, going live on the National Film and Video Foundation YouTube, as well as live Facebook page. National Film and Video Foundation is bringing us all together to commemorate 16 days of activism. We know that gender-based violence and violence in general are terrible afflictions in our country, in our societies, and in our everyday lives, and the entertainment industry isn't exempt from this. We've seen very real life stories of people who are on our TV screens every day who have experienced gender-based violence. And I think this is a good opportunity for us to be able to educate people around how storytelling really with the core of using African films to educate our audiences about gender-based violence. We know that gender-based violence hasn't necessarily been portrayed in the past in our stories. This could be exclusion, or this could be underrepresentation, but I know that we're doing a lot for that now. I'm joined by two esteemed guests today. Nicola Hanekom, who is a screenwriter and director of a film called Cutout Girls, and I'm going to let her speak about it shortly. We also have with us Alison Water. Alison is a survivor of rape. She was raped and stabbed multiple times in 1994 and survived to tell the tale, and now has also written a book, and there's a film adaptation about her story. Welcome, Alison. Welcome, Nicola.
Thank you.
Yes. So let's start with you, Alison. And I mean, this happened so long ago. And the fact that you survived and you're here to be able to tell the tale in the form of a book and a film. Just tell me about how that has been for your own healing process. Why you decided, number one, to go public and tell the story, and what that has meant in terms of your own healing.
Hello, everyone. Yes, it was a long time ago. I mean, it's 25, I don't even know anymore how many years. In the beginning, I must be honest, when I was asked to share my story, it was more because, I mean, it was in the news because I'd survived. It was a big deal. It was a miracle that I had survived what had happened. And so when I talked in the beginning, I don't remember doing it like people think I was one of the first rape victims to speak publicly. I didn't do it with that intention because I didn't even know. I'd never really come across rape before in my realm, so I didn't know that rape victims were supposed to be different. And I suppose maybe in that way it did help me because I wasn't shy to tell my story. To me, I was a victim. People wanted to hear more about what had happened because it was fascinating. And so it started like that more because I wanted to, in the beginning, I wanted to help other people who it had happened to. I just thought maybe I could avoid it. Maybe they could learn something. They could be more aware, because I certainly wasn't. Then it became more, as I was sharing, this is just the talks now, when I was just giving talks, and it was in the beginning just in small groups, I started learning stuff. And that was, for me, the biggest thing I've learned from telling my story is that telling my story has been my healing. That is what has helped me see where there was learning. I think sometimes when we choose not to talk about our stuff, I'm talking about our bad stuff, we don't also then have the opportunity to look to see where, because let's face it, the lessons are sometimes a bit hidden. You know, we've got to give them time to show that they were part of why this happened or whatever. Writing the book was a big deal for me because I did it with Marianne Tam, who, as a ghostwriter, her words to me were, "You have to tell me," like when she said to me, "Well, how did it feel when you crawled through the sand?" And I said, "No, I was scared." And she said, "No, but you have to explain to me that feeling so that I can write about it." So that was hard because I had to really go into depth and in detail. So that was almost like reliving it. So that was, to catch a phrase, I mean, the cliche is it was cathartic. It really was, because it was a process of therapy, I suppose. For me, though, doing the book was also, it's very detailed. There's nothing spared. I tell everything because I wanted it to be a once-off account for myself, but also for others. And it's been incredible how people have said that some of the detail that I've included has helped them because they were maybe shy to speak about certain things. And then, of course, the movie has just been a whole nother way of reaching people in a different dimension. So the movie is kind of part documentary, part, reenactments. So it shows a bit about what happened, but it also shows me speaking. And I think that's one way of getting me speaking out to more than what I can just reach in my audiences. So the whole thing has just been a blessing to me to tell my story, but also the blessing has come, the double-fold blessing is knowing that it might be helping other people on their own journey, that they might be listening to me and thinking, wow, that I echo that, I recognize that. So that has been a part of my healing too, knowing that I might be helping other people.
Thanks for sharing, Alison. And Alison's book is titled I Have Life. Alison's journey, and like she said, it was co-written with Marianne Tam, who's a well-known journalist as well. I want to move over to Nicola just to speak about her film Cut Out Girls, which really speaks and deals with the uneasy subject of date rape. This is something that we know is rife in South Africa, we know has been going on. Nicola, tell me about moving this piece of work, because it is an acclaimed stage play initially, and moving it to the big screen. What was the impetus to do that?
Oh, it's undoubtedly the same as Alison in that I believe that really narrative heals us. Of course, it's to different extents. So I think if you, where do stories come from? If you're working with your own story like Alison, it's a bit like behavioral therapy, telling it again and again in vivid detail sort of heals you from that. And then I think the thing that really is the cherry on top is if you not only nullify that trauma by telling it, but then say, despite the fact that this happened to me, I rise. That is the inspirational thing. So that's where you become the hero in the story. For me, the story isn't as personal. Rape has always been rape and date rape. Very much, I've been witness to that sort of thing, but it's not my story to tell. I was really triggered by an event in my immediate vicinity. So that's where the origin of the story was. And then I heard a club close to me, people were getting date raped there, and that triggered the writing of the play. And then what I think drove me to do the long journey, the hard journey of, crowdfunding and trying to make the film was because I saw what it had done to audiences live. I saw that it helped people heal. I saw that it enabled them to speak up and find the courage to tell their stories. So because I could see that it worked, that was the impetus to do the hard slog of making the feature.
Yeah, and like I said, really taking something that's tragic and turning it into triumph for a lot of people who are survivors and who are victims of this. Now, I know that in the entertainment industry, just last week, we had women coming out based on Amanda Dupont coming out about her own experience in a relationship with a notable figure who's also in the industry. In terms of preparing actresses, and I know that Amanda also on certain occasions, because I worked behind the scenes on a show called Intersections, and she was actually a rape victim in Intersections, but this is before the knowledge of the fact that she had actually gone through it in real life. How do you feel that we as the industry are preparing actresses to not be double traumatized or experience secondary trauma by having to enact such gruesome and horrific storylines? Is there ways we can prepare better when we're telling these kinds of stories to prepare our creatives? Go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, man, because I'm also an actress, this is like this. I'm so interested in that, and also because I train actors. So for me, what you want to do as an actor is emotionally connect and get it as real and truthful as possible, but know how to step away from enacting the part. So in a way, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but in a way, what actors try to do is not get numb, is be able to be traumatized and alive in the moment. So it's this double-edged sword where, for me, it's about being able to step out of it. So if a process, I believe, with an actor is run properly, you can go there, visit these very dark places, and then step out. But of course, it's got to do with mental hygiene, with really running the set and the process properly. I think it's got to do with that. And also people feeling that they can trust and be secure, especially when they visit those more graphic scenes,
Mm, mm. And I just want to speak to the way you treated cutout girls. You know, I don't think we see a lot of the graphic or, you know, that gut-wrenching violence that one would expect. So how did you go about just being sensitive to the way that you portray date rape on screen in the lives of these 6 women whose lives intersect because of something so horrific?
I'm just going to spit it out. But the reason I don't want to show violence or sex or nudity, and I don't in the film because I think the imagination is actually worse. But the reason I don't want to show it is because the scary fact out there is that there's people who might get off on that. So I don't want to give them, I don't want to give them material. So I want to protect my message in a way so that it can't be abused. Yeah, that's basically where I come from in terms of nudity and sexual violence on screen.
And Alison, just in terms of adapting your own story, because obviously you don't come from a filmmaking background, essentially. No. And so you wrote the book, and the point to which you start to create the film, what were some of the things that were important for you to be able to bring across in the film?
Well, you know, over the years, I've been approached many times by people who had thought of doing a movie of some kind. And, you know, some of them even went to pre-development and talking about a script and stuff. I was always very nervous, though, of doing a film in that it is my real life story. So how do I, in some way, protect them from, like I remember one time a lawyer who was working for us said, well, they could just put you in a little red dress and people could have the idea of, you know, she asking for it. Not that anyone does ask for it, but my story, I was nervous about having it changed to not be what it was. And then I met Uga. She was hounding me and persisting, and then I met her, Uga Carlini, in Cape Town. And we just connected on a level of, like, we you know those old souls when you meet them and you just know that you've known them before. So I felt very safe with her. I felt safe that she was a woman, number one, and also the kind of work that she'd done and wanted to do was along the lines of the kind of movie that I wanted to make. So it was more that I felt safe with her doing the process than it was just making a movie. I also liked the fact that she wanted to do the documentary first. I mean, the feature is still an idea, but doing the documentary first meant that it was actually me still telling my story, which I was already a little bit comfortable with having done my talk. So it was weird doing the movie. I didn't like being on camera and stuff, I must be honest. But I felt safe with her telling the story. So yeah, I suppose that was maybe what made me in the end do it. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for those reflections. If you just joined us, we're talking about the importance of storytelling in terms of being able to bring across aspects and social impact films such as Alison's own journey, as well as the film by Nicola Hanekom called Cut Out Girls. If you have any questions, please do post on the YouTube page for the National Film and Video Foundation and on the Facebook page for Life. I just want to ask about what have been some of the reactions to the film? What have been the responses to the films from audiences?
Are you asking me?
Yes, you can go ahead. You can start.
Well, you know, as Nicola said as well, I was only in a few of the actual screenings in the beginning, obviously, but that to me is why you guys do what you do and why I share my story and why we share our stories is when you see the impact on other people. And I think that to know that they are brave enough to tell their own stories because you were brave enough to tell yours, that to me is one of the best accolades and you know trophies that you can get. So my story was very well received. It still is. I mean, it's out on Netflix, and we still get messages. I mean, just the other day, a lady made a TikTok about the movie, telling people you have to go and see this movie, and it's gone viral. I mean, she's got 3-point-something million views. So that to me, just knowing it's out there, reaching people, touching people, you know, it's a very, I think a book, a movie, especially now that it's on Netflix, when you sit there and watch it one-on-one, perhaps at home, you know, people who are stuck at home with lockdown, with the whole pandemic, it's still reaching people on a level where it can actually heal and share lessons. And that's, I think, why I love storytelling, is that you can actually learn from my story without having to go through what I did. That's why I love myself watching movies that are based on true stories or that are real life, because I can then experience it, because you visually really experience a movie, and then learn from it and think to myself, how would I have behaved in that situation? How can I identify with it in my own life without having to go through the whole thing themselves? They can learn some of the stuff that I learned.
Yeah.
That's been the blessing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alison. And to cut up girls, Nicola?
Oh, I was just going to say, so to pick up on Alison's point, that it's so weird meeting you today, because after your book, because it's so vivid, I actually felt like it was we're so intimate with that violation, that I actually feel that I know you, although I don't know you.
I have that a lot where people sort of like, they want to give me a hug because like they know me. It's lovely. I like it.
Yes, it must be so exposing. With the film, I know that the film has had the same response that the theatre play did, because in the theatre play, people would spontaneously, people who had never said that this had happened to them, after the live play, there would be people in the audience more than one time coming out and saying, listen, this happened to me. And it was it was extraordinarily emotional. We've just done this play, and then people would start telling you, listen, this happened to me. And it's the first time that I'm telling someone. I think that the film has had a similar response because of the messages I've received over social media when it was in cinema. I'd get people would tell me their story over social media. Lots of people. It was actually quite overwhelming and a little bit unexpected. Like with the play, I saw, okay, this is happening. But with the film, I didn't really think people would take the trouble to reach out, but they did. So yeah, I think a similar effect. I hope that it doesn't only affect people that have had trauma or have had assault. I would also, specifically with the film, wanted to speak to young men who might be losing their moral compass, who might be going astray. So I was really trying to catch those young men and make them think twice before maybe they lost their way. So that was specifically my aim with the film. I was just hoping, if I can just stop one guy, stop one guy from doing it, that's someone's life, So yeah, that was my aim, my personal aim. I don't know if I had any success.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, speaking to the very rife numbers of violence that we have in this country and generally in the world, it's very disturbing. And I know that we have programs that are trying to, keep young men out of certain influences that would maybe lead them to be able to become perpetrators of violence, etc. But what do you think, or do you feel in terms of the appetite for funders to fund films like this or creative projects like this? And is it important for us to attach an impact aspect to these kind of projects? So your films shouldn't just be seen in the movie theaters. We need to go to boarding schools where these boys are. We need to show them after practice at rugby or soccer. So I just want to speak, number one, about the, the appetite for funding for these kind of films, and number two, how else we can get the message out there to extend the longevity and the message reaching more people through creative mediums such as your films.
I don't really know if there's an appetite for funding. I mean, I don't mean to sound negative, but because I had such a hard time trying to raise some money through crowdfunding. I mean, I was so determined to make it, and I couldn't get funding, so I did it through crowdfunding, which is why it's like really, really a micro budget form. I think the most important thing is to keep working within your sphere of influence, to just keep trying, because else you feel overwhelmed and you feel like you're never going to get anything done. I don't really know if there is an appetite. I think people sort of get numbed and they don't really want to hear this type of story anymore. So that's my sense. But then what I keep doing is, earlier this year I made another film about child abuse. I made another a film about an assault and a father killing his wife and his daughter. So I just keep going whenever there's a gap. To do my thing and to hustle and to get something made. I try, but I don't know if there's an appetite, quite frankly. I don't know, Alison, if you know anything about film funding, or if you're going to struggle, if you want to turn your documentary, if Ugo wants to turn it into a feature film, if she's going to battle, I don't know.
I'm coming from a different side. You guys know much more about funding, but I've tasted a little bit of it. I saw a little bit of it in the struggles that Ugo had just with our documentary, and again, as you say now, with the feature of these things. Just from my perspective, though, the gender-based violence is something I think we're never going to fix. It's never going to go away. We're never going to do enough to make it not happen. But I think that, as you were saying now, Nicola, just to work in your sphere, I think that the fact that we can't make it go away doesn't mean we can't do our bit to make it less or to make that impact into one person's life. I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said, "Don't let what you can't do stop you from doing what you can." And so we must do what we can. And if you're a filmmaker, then that's the sphere that you must work in. I feel that there should be more of an outreach to, I don't know where funding comes from altogether. I know that within the film thing, but there are many companies who have money to set aside for social projects and stuff. They actually want to have projects to work on, and then maybe investing in films that tell a story and have a message is a way that they could also be approached to, help with funding. I don't know. I just know that, like, my children, who are both boys, will come home from school on the days when they have been shown a movie in LO or life orientation, and it's about something similar to what we're talking of now, and it has an impact. It definitely has an impact. I think watching a movie, especially for children these days, is it's immediate. It's what they're used to. It's a screen. I don't think it must stop, and I think it's a way that we must keep on trying to do these kind of movies within stories, telling the stories to reach, as you say, that maybe that one person, but I think it's a lot more. And I think that society should look at this as a vehicle of working with gender-based violence, because it's not one thing that's going to change it. It's bringing a spotlight onto it in all areas, and if that is this area, I think it's a very impactful one for the youth.
A possible hurdle in reaching audience audiences would be the age restrictions that they seem to slap on certain of these things. I really wanted to target our film to say a 16 up audience, but even without the nudity, without any graphic sex, they put a age restriction on us. Wow. So that for me in a way is a pity, but I suppose they evaluate it and they make a decision. But for me it was such an eye opener, because I specifically wanted to try. Because I'm a female filmmaker, I was quite surprised by how rigid they are. So I think, if you want to fund projects to specifically do an outreach to young people, to make something impactful, but still get past the age restriction hurdle will be interesting.
Yeah. So in terms of being able to reach out to the Film and Publications Board when they are starting to rate these films and really drum into them what we're proposing to change in terms of impacting lives, number one, because those are the people we have to reach. We have to reach people while they're still young, while they're still formulating their ideas about the world, while they're still able to, really self-identify in terms of who they want to be as they grow up. So I think that's a gap in terms of what you're speaking about. And I think that's also a challenge to producers when they're thinking about how to push back or how to advocate with the bodies such as the National Film and Video Foundation or Film and Publications Board in terms of rating these films and us being able to reach the audiences that we're trying to reach in order to make a wider societal impact. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
yeah, go ahead.
I say for the films to do their job, they have to be emotionally impactful. Else there's going to be no change. So it's that fine little balance, I think. Yeah.
And just in terms of where you've been able to screen the films so far, I mean, obviously it's movie theaters and the National Film and Video Foundation is screening them as well. But where else can we see the films in terms of where they live after this intervention with the NFVF?
Ours lives on Showmax at the moment, I believe. So I don't know if it will go to any other platforms, I'm hoping, but at the moment it's on Showmax, yeah.
Okay. Now, Alison?
It's going to kill me. I think it's on Showmax. I'm sorry. Well, Amazon, I don't know. I get messages from all over the world, and obviously it's on different platforms in the world. But I'm sorry, it will go. Oh, God. She was. If she's watching,
okay, we'll Google it just now
and tell them where they can see it.
All right, I've got a question that's come in from Stacey at the NFVF, and this is a question for Alison. Did you ever imagine that you could turn something so tragic and painful into helping people to be courageous, find assistance, and become such an inspiration? And was telling your story something you wanted to do, or was it a decision, a very difficult decision to make? I think maybe we touched on this earlier, but just for the interest of this person who's reviewing.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. It wasn't good to answer the second part first. It was never a decision I made. And I think maybe if I had been told beforehand, I literally thought I was going to talk once to the newspaper. One newspaper was going to tell the story. I thought it was going to be once that I did a talk. I never, in any way, did I plan or think that it was going to grow the way it did. I mean, I've traveled all over the world telling the story over the years, so it has been massive, and I'm glad that I wasn't given the decision, that I didn't know, because I might have. I'm very nervous of speaking in public, and if I thought that is what was going to, happen from a decision, I would have said no, which is interesting, really, because I think that sometimes, well, I know this, that we are much stronger than we think we are, and sometimes when and my story that night is that's a very good example of this, that we often don't know what we're capable of until we have no choice. And doing the talks, I've almost had no choice, because I felt, in a way also, and I don't mean to sound all self-righteous or anything, but I never felt like it was my story to keep to myself. It always felt like I had to share it. It always felt like it's a story that's happened to us women, it's happened to our society, it's happened to people, and I had a duty to share what I've learned. I don't know if it comes across the right way, but anyway, I've never felt that I should keep it to myself. And the sort of the bit of the end of that swings back to bless me is that sharing it has, as I said in the beginning, been my healing. And also knowing that it is impacting other people, knowing that it actually there will be people watching or reading the book or something saying, wow, I can get through my stuff. I can face the day, whatever it is. I often have, the ones that interest me the most is when I get emails or a message from someone who's picked on something that I didn't think was a big lesson or wasn't a big deal, but for them, that was what hit home for them. I think we're all so different, and we're also needing of guidance and of inspiration and of lessons and of that. I think sharing a story like this, the kind of movies we're talking about now, I think that's where people are finding their spiritual learning a lot of the time. So, no, I never thought it would be so impactful, but I'm blessed that it has been.
Good. And I mean, just thank you for your strength and your courage to really turn this around, like I said earlier, from something that's so tragic to something that actually empowers you, allows you to empower others, and to make a change in people's lives. So I think that's something very powerful to be able to do. Really,
I must just add something to what Nicola said earlier on, when you were saying on the cherry on the top. It's not just about going from victim to survivor, to use the kind of colloquial words, not remaining, and coming up to, it's actually being better now than you were before. It's taking the trauma. That is what I want to show people, really. That I want to show people that we don't have to just be okay with the stuff that's happened to us. We can actually triumph over it. And that's what life is, isn't it? Our life is taking the stuff that happens to us and growing and learning, not just staying the same.
Yeah.
So that's where I get my inspiration from, is seeing that I've grown as a person in spite of what happened to me. Not only in spite of, but actually because of what happened to me.
So if anyone else is listening out there and you have a story to tell about something difficult that's happened to you, or you feel there's a way that you could yourself move past that through an expressive expression, I think that's what we're talking about in terms of the power of storytelling, not just for the sake of telling the story, but the impact that those stories have. What about you, the two of you? Have there been any films that you've watched where you've come away and said, wow, I'm not the same person anymore, or I am so inspired, or I am so moved by this? It can be something dealing with a heavy topic, or it can be anything. What has impacted you in terms of storytelling?
Nicola, I'm very bad. I'm going to be terrible now and tell you that I absolutely love movies and I love books. But if you ask me, have you read this or have you seen that? And it's bad. I know it's bad, but I can't tell you that I have until I actually start watching it again, and then I think, oh yes, I have. So give Nicola a chance to talk, and I'll see if I can think of something.
Well, I'm going through the folders in my mind, and the first two examples that come up are local films. So I was very inspired by a film. I had a little part in it, but I was a small part in it. But as an actress, a film called Dis Ek Anna, which really looked at child abuse. It was by Sarah Blecher. I think it was also based, strangely enough, having you here, Alison, on a real story. That for me was really like a gut punch. It was really made me think, and it stayed with me. And then the other local example of a story was a film called Tess by Mick Rickards. I also thought was really, really well done, looking, staying with GBV and what we're talking about today.
The funny thing is that Christia Fisser, who plays Tess, also played me in my documentary, so there's a connection there too.
And she trained as an actress at the academy where I work.
Exactly.
My daughter. It's wonderful. It comes full circle. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched something recently on Netflix called Unbelievable, and it's about a female stand-up comic. So already you can see the world that it's set in is very unusual, but she literally goes on a very self-destructive path because she hasn't dealt with the fact that she was raped. So it's also like Nicola's saying, something that's done subtly. You just wondering, why is this woman on such a destructive path? And as it unfolds, it sort of starts to show you why she's come to the point she's come to. And it stayed with me for a long time, just in terms, it's just a haunting, really way in which it brings across the things that you don't deal with and how they start to impact on your behavior without you even realizing until much later and pinpointing why. And then Zamon Khan, he also had a film out last year, set outside, and I think if you're familiar with her work, she does a lot of work that's just outdoors and just observation. And this film is set in the park, shot somewhere here in Joburg and in Durban. And it's just basically about witnessing what's going on with passerbys, the catcalling that happens, and the impact that this has on both the people who are on the side of the receiving and some of the boys who are also part of that group. So those are two films that sort of stay with me. And I love the way that Zamo uses film language in a way that it's almost like you're just sitting there as a person watching the movie, but it's also like you're literally on that street watching what's happening and you want to intervene. So, yeah.
You're really looking.
Yeah. Yes.
I like what you're saying about, what was it called? Unbelievable. What did you say the first one? I think that is a very impactful movie, and maybe a way of getting a movie passed by the board and everything. I was just thinking by just showing a life that's going on now past trauma, if I can put it that way. You don't have to show the trauma, but then because I think that is the truth for a lot of people. And that is why it's such a release, perhaps, to see movies like what Nicholas made and my movie, and be able to talk for the first time. Because when we don't talking about storytelling now, when we don't tell our stories, they do stay inside, and they do. Maybe some of us can ignore them, and some of us are lucky, and we can go on, and But I think many times they demand attention. That's why sometimes people say to me, "Don't I now kind of like live with this whole thing because it's so much part of what I do and I talk about it, and don't I relive it?" And to me, if I hadn't talked about it, it would have demanded attention, maybe in nightmares, maybe in my behavior, as you're saying, maybe in the choices I made in relationships, I'm not sure. But putting attention to it in my own life has meant that I can almost ignore it when I'm just chilling and with my family, if you know what I mean. It's had its attention. So showing that kind of movie, I think is, I was just thinking now about movies that I have to be honest with you. I think because of what happened to me, I choose not to watch movies that are uncomfortable, which is, I do watch them, I have to, but most of the time for me, it's more about a place of release where it's not maybe based on anything true. And I can actually remind myself this is just a movie, which is a way of getting away from the reality of it, although the reality of movies are so powerful. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it also brings in this interesting thing of the ethics of, as a filmmaker, what stories you tell, I've often thought to myself, will I write a slasher film, for instance? If I was offered a writing contract, would I go there? And I know that for some people it's a lot of fun. It's really fun. They love watching it. But then, it's funny. It's like when you're an actor and they say, "Will you be in the McDonald's ad?" But you're a vegan. It brings up like, what do you choose to engage with? What do you put out into the universe? It brings that up for me, which is interesting.
I think that's each individual person depends on how strongly you stand in your morals. Some people, would bend and not have a problem with it. I do like to believe that as a society, as a whole, as a human race, we are moving more to being true to ourselves because we are being more open with what we can be. Where we used to have to fit into kind of this many boxes, there are now so many more boxes that are showing themselves and that people are speaking openly about and showing in movies and in various ways. That I like to think that people are braver now in speaking out about what and standing in their place because they know they won't be alone. I think so. Anyway. When I think of different sexualities and different beliefs and different things, I think there are that many more now out in the forefront. Am I right? I mean, I don't know. That's how I feel.
I'll tend to agree with you, Alison, because just if you think about films that came out a few years ago, and I was just reading an article this week about the movie Rush Hour, as well as the movie Dude, Where's My Car? Or American Beauty. I'm thinking about the times when these films came out, and when we compare them to something of that nature coming out now, there would be uproar in terms of some of the things that we see on the screen, in terms of some things that they got away with putting out there. So I also like to believe that there is a lot more integrity in terms of the type of stories or the treatment that people are giving stories. I don't know if Tarantino will ever change the way he makes films, but I know that generally when we think about the fact that we have more information, and like Alison says, it seems that we're in a world that is more open to discussing the very difficult things that we didn't know how to before. We have more language around it, and I think there's more empathy. As much as we are bombarded by a lot of information and social always look friendly, and we know that there is a lot of online bullying and some other effects of living in a world that is so highly connected and so highly digital, that we do lose some of those senses of the tactile and empathetic ways in which we deal with each other as human beings. But I do really feel that there's a lot more people watching, and there's a lot more ways which we can have backlash to the things we put out. So I think people are being careful, and people are thinking twice about what it is they're putting out. Well, that's just what I like to think.
Yeah. I tend to agree as well, because as you say, now these days you do something and you know that people are going to give their opinion, and so you have to be therefore made conscious yourself of why you are thinking a certain way, why you are behaving in a certain way. I think that's, as a parent, I'm very conscious of how I bring up my boys in how they think when they're out there, because I know they will influence others. And I think that's the same thing. We must be very careful of how we, as filmmakers or as people who share, know that your story will then be told again, and it's going to be an influence. So own your influence that you're going to make, and be aware of what it's going to be. And as you said, Nicola, not putting nudity in your movie because you knew there might be people who took it in the wrong way. That's a brave call and a good call, because you had and you stood by it. I think it's great.
But things are just so banal. We're so bombarded by superficiality, and really just, I find it just banal, and if you look at Instagram, that's why I don't understand the age limits of stuff, because sometimes if I look at my Instagram feed, that's more pornographic than my film, and sort of where's that line? I do believe, because there's all this social media and everything is so sexualized, I believe that there is really a need for stuff with depth, and people really want to engage with something on a deeper level and on a spiritual level. I don't think it's, for me, I don't just want the plastic in the world,
Because life is so much more, and life is short and precious, and I think we should fill it with things that are meaningful and impactful.
Sorry, just a question, because I'm from the outside the film industry kind of person. I'm just the person who goes and watches a movie. What are the processes that the people who are going to put the age restriction on a movie, those kind of things? How often does that get reviewed? How often does it get changed? Because as you're saying, Nicola, the times are changing. We know that from what was okay 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, it is changing. So does that get reviewed often? Because it does always seem, I know we also had the same problem with our movie. In fact, certain things got taken out just so that they could try and get into a certain, make sure that certain children could see it, or certain ages. But when you look at, I've got a 15-year-old, when I see what he knows about, what he speaks about, what he's obviously seeing, it's a lot worse than what we are so-called saying is okay for them. And I'm just wondering who to kind of like approach on that level. I suppose it's a thing that filmmakers have all the time. But I think it should be reviewed and be able to have other people's opinion put up on a much more, anyway.
Yeah, we've got teenage boys as young as 10 and 11 that are addicted to porn over the internet. So I do believe that our board might be a little bit too conservative or out of touch, but that's just my sort of experience of it, because
especially sorry, Nick, to interrupt, but especially when there's a movie like yours that could actually have a positive influence, which, and I don't want to say, but where maybe you're reaching people who don't have the parents who are telling them the right behavior, they're not getting the good influence or the message, the morals from anywhere else, perhaps.
Because that's really hard. As much as we go on about, how it empowers us telling the story, how it heals us, there's that those people who actually perpetrate, how do we reach them? That's what I'm interested in, because I did so much research, and also the two amazing actors who portrayed the perpetrators in my film. You know, we really tried to grapple and understand where this comes from. Not that we got any answers, but how do we reach the young men? How do we reach the boys? At some point, to have any success, we're going to have to, you know, try to figure that one out. Just incidentally, we were talking earlier about like actors being traumatized by visiting dark material. I just wanted to say that I think it is as difficult for the people who are portraying the perpetrators as it is for the people portraying the victims in the film. You know, those guys really, two beautiful, sensitive, lovely human beings, for them to visit and get into that space where they play that truthfully was also, quite interesting. And then for them to let that go, you know, and go, okay, I'm not that. But one of the actors actually said to me, it was very interesting. It was very interesting trying to go there, because as a human being, I've got all my morals intact. I've got my boundaries. I don't open that part inside myself. That is that. And he seemed to learn a lot and say he doesn't want to go there again.
It's a dark place, I can imagine. And I think that's why it's also important to have that sort of counseling for the actors and actresses who sort of have to go and delve into these very dark, deep places. I think just that before you get into character, and also to let go of the character, just supporting them to be able to get back to who they really are. And I know, like, now in our industry, we're doing much more intimacy coordination, just to make safe on set. That obviously is very, very important. But I think it is also just as important for the director and for the cast to be quite open and check in with one another and see, hey, how are you actually doing on the inside? You know, what is this triggering anything for you? Are you cool? Most actors, you know, professional actors, they've got that sort of self-help and those boundaries and those ways to soothe themselves and get out of stuff within their toolkit, you know. Hopefully.
I mean, just as an outsider, I would think that on a set, especially one dealing, well, maybe every set, I don't know, but except a comedy, but especially dealing with these kind of issues, there should possibly be a psychologist, a therapist, or someone around. As you were saying, Nicola, a lot of trained actresses and actors. I mean, you train them, you will help them with training that, but then you've got all these people on set, as you say, who are the cameraman, and also living this and seeing it, and maybe triggering some stuff that is difficult for them to deal with. And so maybe having some kind of therapist or person part of the more funding. But anyway,
I think it is encouraging, because I know that the NFVF also supports a program called the Safety Contact Officer Project. These are people, trained counselors and social workers, who do go on sets and can assist people either as victims of sexual harassment on set, or people who may be perpetrators and want to seek ways to get help. So I know that this is something that is encouraging to see a shift and a conscience about the way we are treating people on set and the way we're treating each other, just as a culture in entertainment. So I know that's definitely one thing that the NFVF is supporting through the Sisters Working in Film and Television, something called the Safety Contact Officer Project. And there's also another organization called Safe Sets, who do go on sets and assist with this kind of intimacy coordination for difficult scenes that may to do with a sexual nature, or that may have to do with someone being going through something that could be potentially traumatic. So I think it's encouraging to see that the industry is moving towards that. And like Nicola said, I think these are important stories we need to be able to tell because of the society we live in, to be able to some way be able to, through the stories we shall not just reflect it back, but also inspire positive change. I think we can just do our closing remarks. We are almost out of time. It's been so wonderful to speak to you both. But just in closing, in terms of what you're up to and just what your hopes are for being able to tell stories that have an impact for society.
I just want to keep...
Alison.
Oh, sorry.
Me. Well, it's been lovely as always to have people in front of me and sharing and stuff. And that to me is, I actually found with lockdown and not being able to tell my story, I found it impacted me personally. That I felt a bit down, and so I know it feeds me. So the storytelling, as I've said now already, it benefits me, but knowing that it is blessing other people. So I just hope that I can continue with telling my story the way I do, on a more personal and intimate level with the audiences. But obviously what is in the pipeline now with Uga as well is a feature film on my story, which I believe is another vehicle still to be impacting people, and I mean, it's just wonderful when we get the feedback from other people from around the world, where a story of a human nature, doesn't matter where you are. I remember in the beginning when I first went overseas telling my story, I thought maybe they won't get it, because it's a South African story. But I think trauma, certainly gender-based violence, is something that the world over suffers from and are victims of. And they have them in society, but also just to know that even though it might be a different trauma, it can still help with whatever issues a person faces. So I do hope to continue sharing my story, maybe remember a few names of a few movies in the future that I like. But that's what I'm hoping for my future. I don't know if I've answered your question properly, Sarah, but thank you for having me on this panel too. And it's lovely to have met Nicola as well and hear more about her movie.
Thanks, Alison. Over to you, Nicola, and then we have one last question to answer from the audience.
I'm always busy writing, so I've got those projects that I do just for money because I'm on the planet and there's gravity and you have to buy food and things. And then I've got those other projects that's also on my laptop that I spend, that are my heart projects. I'm up to those. My hopes would be that my film that I've already made, Cutout Girls, could get some more platforms. But today I'm just thankful that I got to meet Alison, who's been a hero of mine since I read a very inspirational book. And I just wish you guys get the funding for that feature. It's important.
Thank you.
Hope the funders are listening. We just have one more comment from someone who's who's watching us. Hello, Nolo, and hello to everybody who is watching on the NFVF YouTube page and on the live Facebook page. Nolo Piri asks, do you think that there's a gap or need for stories that give voice to perpetrators, to try to understand the psychology of why they do what they do? Or do we think that this would be giving power to the monster or feeding that sort of behavior, so to speak? Thanks for your question, Nolo.
That first part broke up. Do we think just the first part? Sorry, I had a little bit of an internet glitch here.
Do we think there's a gap or a need to give stories that tell the side of the perpetrator, to understand the psychology of why they do what they do?
That would be so interesting. That would be so interesting. But to get to the truth of that, to really understand what drives that, will be very, very hard. I'm currently working on a script that's set in a male prison, and I've been interviewing a lot of people who've been through the prison system and trying to get to the answers of what drives people to rape. I still haven't got a truthful answer. So I think it would be an amazing film to make if you can make it in the right way so that the violence doesn't get celebrated. You obviously want to slant it so that it's about spiritual growth and learning. But I don't know who's going to make that film, because I don't know who has the knowledge.
Just from my own side on that, I think that I know when I was going through my therapy in the beginning, one of the biggest things that I had a hurdle with was trying to understand them and trying to understand why they would have done what they did to me. And I remember after quite a few weeks of sort of like working with what a psychopath means and everything, the therapist actually said to me, he said, Alison, if you were to come to a place of understanding of why they did what they did, then in some way, some part of you inside would have to accept them, because you now understand them. And so it was kind of like a little bit of a shock to me, like I don't actually want to accept. So in a way, I think that there's so many different reasons There are different, there's Southwest, there's past history, there are things, but I also fear that in a movie like that, you might be giving some people excuses or reasons that they are the way. So it would have to be so carefully done to not be giving, to not be giving them any kind of, or other people who are watching, like you were saying with the nudity thing, you wouldn't want other people who are on the verge of being a perpetrator to look and think, oh, I get that, I recognize that in myself, I'm going to go ahead. So
that's a good idea.
It would be a very, very difficult movie to do, to make sure that that is not, because then you're actually in yourself, as you said, celebrating or at least encouraging.
Or glorifying. Yeah. Thank you, Alison Boertel, and thank you to Nicola Honeycomb for sharing your stories, and I wish you all the best for your projects. Thank you to the National Film and Video Foundation for this session about impactful storytelling. And tomorrow is the end of 16 days of activism, but it doesn't mean that we have to stop extending the kindness and softness that we all want for ourselves to each other. We're also celebrating Human Rights Day, so let's think about the responsibilities we have as creatives, as storytellers, to contributing to a better world. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Bye, Sarah. Thank you.
Bye.
And we're live. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this year's edition of Lavuth Festival. Huge shout outs to our sponsors, by the way, which include the National Film and Video Foundation for making this possible. Now, as you know, this year's theme has been centered around the theme of gender-based violence, which is probably a pandemic on its own that South Africa is fighting and that we are going through. And it was only necessary and it only made sense that we have this conversation, especially when it comes to the world of film and television, a world that is dominated by men, a world that has been unfair for the longest of times when it comes to the female, a world that has been a bit tricky to navigate when it comes to women, and a world that has the power and the tools through storytelling to educate people about the negative impacts that gender-based violence has in our community. Now, joining us for our panel today, I am joined by the lovely Miss Nolita Kozwa-Fenton, who is a founder and chief creative engineer at Creative Genius Media, and she'll be chatting to us about gender-based violence from the perspective of a female filmmaker and how it has impacted her career and the stories she tells. And then on this side, I'm joined by Mr. Tembani Kriba, who is the head of Doctors Family Care NGO, and he will be telling us about his GBV awareness programs in schools in general, as well as the project that led to the production of 2 short films that were, of course, screened earlier today, or was it yesterday? Welcome, guys. First of all, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. All right. So how are you guys doing? It's been a rough year. We're almost at the end of the year. How is year-end fatigue treating you? Let's start there.
I think it's better than last year, only because this year we knew what to expect, sort of, with the pandemic. So last year was quite rough because it was new. So yeah. I think this year is better. We can only be positive and look forward.
Yeah. Mr. Kriba, how's the year-end fatigue treating you?
Yeah, so far so good. As Nolita just said, better than last year because we are more prepared this year, especially when we started, we knew what we are going to face, especially with the pandemic and also the lockdown and so on. So yeah, it's much better.
Yeah. Now, as I did mention today, we are talking about gender-based violence. And in particular, we want to focus on how well that gender-based violence content performs in terms of the world of film and television. And if you do have any questions or comments, then please do feel free to, I've got my phone right here in front of me, so do feel free to interact with me on social media. My name is Lavuth on Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. Feel free to DM me on any of those platforms. Also, please do go ahead and check us out on the National Film and Video Foundation YouTube page. Also, feel free to leave a comment down below over there. But I want to start off by saying as well that we were expecting to speak to Ms. Jackie Achilles, but as you do know, who is the SABC commissioning editor for drama, but as you do know, we live in South Africa. Eskom sometimes is a bit touch and go, so we are hoping that we will be able to get her to join the session a little bit later on. Hopefully, Eskom will be kind to us today. But I want us to start off this conversation. Mr. Kobe, I want to start off with you, right? Now, you are the head of the Doxa Family Care NGO. Can you please just start off by introducing what this NGO is all about for people like me who aren't familiar with it?
All right. Doxa Family Care, as the name says, family care is a family preservation program that mainly focusing in equipping parents and especially trying to encourage parents to be involved in raising their kids. But our program mainly focuses on men, on fatherhood programs, as well as victim empowerment programs that caters basically for men and women who are victims of gender-based violence. Because we know that South Africa, it's a crime zone. It's a crime scene. Women are being killed every day and children are being abused. There's so many forms of abuse that are there. especially in families. So yeah, we try to preserve the family, but our angle is to make sure we offer psychosocial support to victims of gender-based violence in those families. Yeah.
Now, I love what you say that you are about preserving the family. So and I see over here that you've got, well. Yeah. Can you repeat that again for me, sir?
Okay, I think my network is bad. We do have a men's shelter as well here in PE. I think it's the only one in the Eastern Cape that caters for men who are victims of crime and also men who are victims of domestic violence, you know, and also other forms of crime, just to try and stop the cycle of abuse, because stats show that most perpetrators of violence were once the victims themselves. So hence we have the men's shelter, you know, to stop the cycle that if you have been victimized yourself, you don't have to do the same thing. Our shelters also caters for LGBTQI men, so it's not only for men who are straight, but it's for all men. We don't discriminate. So we have clients that are LGBTQI who have been abused. So yeah, we cater for everyone as long as you are a man.
Yeah. Now, I see that it's also mentioned here in some of the research that I did that you guys also have projects that you do in schools and programs that you're running in schools. Can you please just tell us a bit more about some of these programs, how they work, you know, and what exactly you're trying to achieve with them?
Yes, we do have programs that we run in schools, starting from grade 8, you know, where we educate learners about the forms of gender-based violence, as well as we educate them about the consequences and the roots of gender-based violence. It's very important to try and educate them at that age, even though we believe that it's already too late. It should start at the primary school level. But our programs starts with grade 8 learners, where it's more of a prevention program where we educate them about self-respect, you know, where we educate them about respecting, you know, the rights of others. We educate them about basic human rights, the importance of knowing those rights, as well as what are your responsibility as a young person towards the rights of others. Because I think that's where we miss it, you know. It's not enough to know the rights, but what are my responsibilities to make sure that those rights are upheld? So we do have such programs like that. Also, a second program that we have at schools, it focuses on boys. It's called Singamadoda Open Circle Dialogues, where we deal with the issues of identity with young men. We deal with the issues and of not only identity, but just to know where you are going and what is masculinity, because there seems to be confusion of what masculinity is based on what young boys are exposed to. They're exposed to pornography, they're exposed to violence. So the Singamadoda Open Circle Dialogues, it deals with that, just to educate young boys about positive masculinity, trying to move them away from toxic masculinity based on what they are exposed to. So our program in schools, it does that. 2 years back, I think 2 to 3 years back, we partnered with GIZ and other stakeholders in the city. It's a multi-stakeholder partnership where we came with different skills. Ours, we specialize in positive masculinity. We have other organizations, you know, that specialize in different things. So we partner together so that we can come up with a powerful preventative program against gender-based violence in schools. Thanks.
Yeah. Now, I love that you touched on exposure, you know, things that young men and young boys are exposed to. And I just want to, you know, bring it back to now, because of course, this is a film festival. So I do want to ask from you, as somebody who works directly with gender-based violence on a daily basis, do you think that mainstream media, in particular television and film, you know, that is freely available to everybody, do you think it deals enough with the issue of gender-based violence?
No, I think there's a lot that the mainstream media can do, and especially the production companies. If you look at the most popular telenovelas now in the country, you look at the lead main characters, especially men, most of them are abusive.
Yeah.
You know, and strange enough, they are popular. You know, you will find out the show will kill the character, but because due to the popularity of that character, there will be a demand for that character to come back. So we seem to have a sad relationship with abusers in this country. We love them. We are the characters that are abusive. So I would love to see more characters that are clean, that portray positive masculinity, take lead roles, you know, especially in the most popular shows in our country, like your telenovelas, your soap, you know, your soapies and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you touch on some of the characterization, you know, that is used when it comes to the telenovelas, which are literally South Africa's most watched format, you know, and you spoke of the characterization of the leading men, you know. Can you just break us, you know, and just explain it a bit more about what are some of the stereotypes that you would love to see removed? Because most of these characters, as you have said, are sort of cookie cutter characters, you know, the male drug lord, you know, they're not so clean. So can we go into that a little bit more? Because I tend to agree with you on that point.
Yeah, you look at how sexiness in the characters is associated with abuse. You know how a strong man is associated with abuse. Power, it is always associated with having many women, cheating, you know, and the abuse of the financial abuse of side, that those who have money in all these characters, they seem to be more abusive, how they use their money, you know. So that is a challenge with all these characters, and the beating of women, the emotional abuse that they portray, you know, and also how they treat, you know, the LGBTQI community. You will discover that most of these characters, most of them, they're against that, you know, and the words that they use to discriminate, even though now we see more characters of LGBTQI, but we still have those elements where there's still abusive words that are being used. And sadly, you know, when young people, they look at these films, you know, they don't get the educational part of it. You know, they get attracted to the toxic side of the character, and then which is it's what we grow up with, and also the fact that violence is used to solve some of these problems by the lead characters. You know, it also means to me as a viewer that in order for me to solve anything, I must use violence. I must use my power, whether it's money, whether it's through political connections, and so on. So we need to look at those things. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I actually love some of the pointers that you make, because we do see like an increasing amount of violence, you know, that are portrayed in these telenovelas. And we can't deny that even though there is the age restriction on the screen, you know, telenovelas are some of the biggest bonds that families have, you know, in South Africa, because that's when the entire family comes together over supper and they enjoy their favorite telenovela. And you know, some filmmakers might argue and might use that we are trying to spark a conversation. Do you think that they are doing this the right way, or you know, they could use maybe another approach in starting these conversations?
Yes, I think so. I mean, there are so many creatives in this country, and I believe that they must be given some chance, to be able to write, to come up with storylines that are different. Obviously, it will take some time for the viewers to get used to lead characters that portray positive masculinity, but we need to get there at some point. But I know, it's all about money, it's all about the viewers, it's all about, marketing and advertising. But at some point, we will get there, but we need to take that risk, allow some lead characters who portray positive masculinity, to take the lead roles. It's going to be a struggle, but at least we will sensitize people slowly but surely. It's not going to happen overnight. So we need to take that risk.
Yeah. Now, I want to, I've seen quite a bit of content that is skewed towards, spreading the message of, how wrong gender-based violence is and trying to address that problem. Now, for somebody who works in this reality, who deals with gender-based violence on a daily basis, how do you feel the subject is treated by filmmakers? Are they doing it well? Because, I mean, recently, one of South Africa's biggest telenovelas, Uzalo, had a wildly popular gender-based violence storyline, that got social media's tongues wagging like nobody's business. When things like that are done, how do you think the handling, could it be better, or do you like it when it's more graphic, or do you think it should be more subdued? How do you think they could handle it?
Okay, I didn't get the whole question, and I think maybe due to network. But yeah, and we need to be careful in terms of. Come again?
Oh no, I was just saying I could repeat the question. My question is, when it comes to how filmmakers are handling the subject of gender-based violence and how they're portraying it on TV, do you feel that it's being exposed in a raw manner, in a very blatant manner, is the way to go? Or would you like to see it being handled differently as somebody who works with gender-based violence on a daily basis? I'm trying to figure out how close to reality, one, would you like to see it being portrayed on television? And two, the state of it right now. How close to reality is gender-based violence being portrayed on television?
Yeah, it's close, but I would love to see more consequences, especially for the perpetrators, because usually the people who will display acts of violence, it's the lead characters, and most of the time they get away with it easily. So I would love to see more consequences, especially for someone that is watching, so that they can know that if I do this and that, there are consequences to pay, So, and also the thing is about telenovelas, it's just a story for some time and then it quickly moves on. So without seeing so much consequences for the person who has done the crime. And also I would love to see more intervention for the victims, of the violence itself, so that we can see and learn that there is that people can get. So, but the story always quickly moves out without we seeing that the victims, what they go through, the trauma that they suffer, and how do they access help, And also we would love to see that the perpetrators, there are consequences, you have to pay dearly. But I believe but it's a telenovela, so the little character at the end of the day must come back and be the hero,
Yeah.
You cannot kill Lindiwe, from from the river, you know, you cannot kill Babo Mngana, who is abusive, from the queen, you know. So yeah, but we will have to see more consequences. Yeah.
I like that.
Thank you.
More consequences. But now I really would love to take it from what we see on screen to taking it to the world behind the screen, the world that puts this together. Lolita, hello.
That was so fast. You know, congratulations to you guys, Lavuth, and this life initiative against GBV. And I hope that you guys will go to greater and new heights with us. You know, we do need it.
Yes.
And
thank you so much.
Yes, and I'd like to thank Kembani, and I think you've mentioned something, more consequences. Because if you see consequences, then you know what, you know, that's what they expect in the real world. Just to start off, my purpose is in this world is to be alive. Remember I said that the last time I was here?
Yeah.
I did very well with what I do as a career, as a filmmaker, because what we do is to bring stories to life. We bring imaginations to life. We bring ideas to life. So it's an exciting world. And it also helps us to bring the world we want to see to life.
Yeah.
So I've been asked to talk about how GBV has impacted my career and the stories that I've told. And I think one of the things I would like to add to that is also share some of the solutions that I've come across in my journey as a filmmaker and also as a businesswoman. So I grew up in a society where GBV was a norm. You know, I remember when I was in my teens and early 20s, girls would be like, yo,
Akatandi.
You know,
He
doesn't hit you, he doesn't love you, and he doesn't care about you.
Yeah, so and not to cut you off, but you would be shocked at how that was a common saying while you were growing up. And I still get taken aback because I still hear the same slogan, you know, being thrown around sometimes. And I'm completely taken aback because it makes no sense to me.
Exactly. And I was shocked to hear that last year when MTV did a poll and asking young girls, and that same sentiment is still here. So this is the world we live in. And I think also for me, what happened when my alcoholic father turned out to abuse my mother. What my mother did, she packed us up with my brother and she moved out of the house. And I think for me, that was the courage that she gave me as a young woman. That simple step of her not saying anything to me, but just packing us and packing her things and leaving the house. It also made me, in my late 30s, pack up and leave an abusive marriage. So it's also important how we, how as mothers, we portray ourselves in these situations, you know, and with support, obviously, some of the women have no support. There's a lot of factors surrounding the issue of GBV.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying about this story of mine, this short and little story of mine, is that GBV has long impacted my life and the life of other young women in the country and other filmmakers. Long before I even thought of becoming a filmmaker, I was already in this world. And obviously every decision that I made was also affected by this world that I was in. So the first thing that I noticed when I wanted to be a filmmaker and I was interested and I watched shows and look at the credits, I saw that it was mostly men and they were mostly white. And I was like, oh, so what's happening here? You know, and later on, I realized that that spoke to what is called structural violence. So
okay.
there's something called structural violence, which is a form of gender. So let me read it from safespaces.org.za. It says it's a form of gender-based violence, right? Where violence is built into structures appearing as unequal power relations and consequently as unequal opportunities. This is when certain groups, classes, genders, and nationalities have privileged access to goods, resources, and opportunities over others. And also when this unequal advantage is built into social, political, and economic systems that govern people's lives. So now you see, so we've got something called structural abuse in our industry. So when I was inside the industry, I realized that women were mostly pushed into admin, logistics, you know,
makeup,
the creative makeup, wardrobe, the creative table was for, you know, the great gods, you know, the men, and you dare sit in there and talk. And I was pushed down a lot of times in those tables. And to a point that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to lose my creative, you know, when you don't feel creative, when you feel sucked out.
When your creativity is muted because every time you express an idea, it's sort of met with a, oh, okay, we'll come back to that. And then nobody ever comes back to that.
Exactly. So I was like, I was starting to be on mute. My confidence was like crashed, you know. I wouldn't speak up. I would have an idea and then I would hold it in. And then afterwards, and then you hear people's ideas, you're like, and then you would speak to someone on the side and they're like, why didn't you bring it up? You know, so that's when I realized, you know what, it's time to kind of move on, get another job. And I was so excited. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to a Black company. Like, yeah, look at me. You know, I'm going to tell my own stories. I'll be listened to. And I worked for production companies that were owned by men. And, you know, in my hallelujah and on my journey to the land of milk and honey, I was crushed again to realize that there was another form of structural violence within those spaces, which was more for me, what I've experienced was financial, the financial violence. So now you're a woman, you're not supposed to ask for money. You don't know money. You're not supposed to get paid what you're worth. And in the mix of that, my juniors were getting paid far less, and I was unhappy about it because they would complain to me. But when you take that up, or you can't even at times take it up, you know, you've taken it up once and it's a no. So now you can't take that thing up all the time because you also need the job. So you also need to protect your bread and butter. So eventually it went on to freelancers, service providers, and then we would pay them less and I would be asked to negotiate them down. And then when I realized that, you know what, Nolita, you are actually colluding. There's nothing you're changing here. You are actually part of this system and this financial system that keeps oppressing women in the industry. And then that's when I was like, you know what, I guess it's time to just take the leap of faith, start Creative Genius Media, and create the world that I want to see, especially for women and younger women, and nurture the talent in the space. And also nurture the development of stories that are about women, stories that uplift women, and also stories that challenges the stereotypes. You know, because there's a lot of stereotypes, like Kuku Tembani was saying, on screen, we see a lot of stereotypes about who women should be, you know, and most of the time that's because women are not sitting in the behind the scenes, the important roles behind the scenes.
They're not making the decisions.
They're not decision makers behind the scenes. So someone else, you know, and also especially about race as well, about our color as Black women, you know, there's things that we know, you know, that are stereotypes about us as Black women, not even about women, just us as Black women. So if we sit in those positions behind the scenes, then we have the opportunity. If we create our own companies, then we have the opportunities to tell the stories we want to tell, and to also nurture writers, young writers who have the voices that need to be heard. So so basically that leads me to the stories that I've told along the years. I'll pick let me pick 3. Yes, let me pick 3.
Before you move on to the stories, we have a question from YouTube from Nulu Piri. Nulu, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Nulu wants to know, do you think there is a gap or a need for stories that give voice and face to perpetrators to try to understand the psychology of why they do what they do? Or would that be giving them power or giving power to the monster, so to speak? Would that be giving them power if we said, okay, here's a platform, show us things from your point of view?
That is quite a challenging question.
Interesting, right?
How I need to be careful how I thread with this one. How I would answer that, it's Nolo, right? How I would answer that, Nolo, is we need different angles to this story. That I know. And I think it would be interesting to look into, I used to watch a lot of those crime channels. So to look into the mind of the perpetrator, but also with sensitivity. I think what these things always require is sensitivity, you know, and making sure that when you tell that story, you are not excusing the crime or the behavior. But if I had to sit with one perpetrator today, what I would like is to take them through the journey of healing, because I also still believe that we need to tell stories that are about healing, because both men and women, both people in the GBV space are not well when they come out of that. You know, so we need to find a way to heal both parties, or rather say everyone involved, including the children as well. As a child who's experienced that, I had to do a lot of work in terms of healing, you know, So
and I'd also like to actually, if Utembani is still there, I would like to find out from him. Do you think, you know, just how to answer Nolu's question, do you think that we should be giving perpetrators a face and a platform to sort of show their side?
I think yes. One of our programs that we have a program where we profile the abuser, as well as where we tell people about the beliefs of the abuser. You know, once people, they get to know that truth, you know, you can see that people are starting to wonder, what if my boyfriend, I think my boyfriend is part of the abuser. Remember, the abuser does not come to you first as abusive. They appear charming, you know, but you can pick up from his beliefs, you know. He believes that anger leads to violence, you know. He blames everyone else for his program, for his problems, but not himself. So, but once you begin to equip people that these are the beliefs of the abuser, you are able then to make that decision that, can I stay in this relationship because it may lead to this. So I believe it's very important to profile the abuser, know what they think, how they grow up, you know, and so that it can warn the potential victim, you know. But if I stay in this, it may end up like this. I don't think it's giving them the face, but I think it's just being cautious that be careful. This man that seems charming and so on, he may be the potential perpetrator of abuse. So I believe we need stories like that, where they profile the abuser We need to know the beliefs of the abuser, and then, yeah, so that we can be able to warn the victims.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Muthamani. Nolita, you were about to jump into some stories of you again.
Yes, I like what Muthamani said about warning, because also like that's very important aspect that he said, because really sometimes we don't know what to look for, you know.
Picking up the red flags.
Yes, like he's saying, people like blaming other people, stuff like that, and then you would know that, oh, okay, these are red flags, you know. Yeah, we should talk more about that. Yeah, so as I was saying, the first documentary that I've made was for SABC1 Education, and it was called Vukuzenzele Still We Rise. So it was looking at what were young people doing in South Africa post 1976. So I made sure in that story that I featured a woman, you know, like, and then this woman was a young voice and a force at the time in Port Elizabeth, Ulele Tumahambehla. Because
I love her.
Yes, because I felt like women had a voice, you know, there was something bubbling about the space in Central. We had open mic sessions, so PE was really a bubbling, melting point, a part of creativity at the time. I have goosebumps. So it was just one of those things that we could never tell a story like that without having a woman there, and a woman with a voice and an image to share with the world. So lighting the spotlight on women is one of the things I like to do, pastime thing. So yeah, and then my second one was Amabele which simply means my breasts. And this is simply because I've seen breasts all around television, music videos, other people owning the breasts, and also advertising world uses the breasts as sexual objects. And then I was like, you know, why don't we just own the breasts as women? These are our breasts, you know, taking back the breasts, and also explore what these breasts mean to us and mean to the Xhosa culture, and also what does it mean to a woman, because it also forms part of our self-image. So we explored that. And the third story was a drama, which I entered into the drama space as a director just recently, and hoping to do more. I'm here. So
yes, please do more. Yes.
So it was called Ubudoda, and I co-written that story, and it was really about having men's emotions out there, having men to talk about themselves. And Naati was challenging his father, you know, to open up, to talk, to heal together, to go through the pain. And Naati, as an 18-year-old, was going through his own pain, and his father had to be a part of it. And for a change, it wasn't a mother that was holding like this boy, was a father. So those are the kind of stories. And with that, we wanted to kind of like bring a space for healing and you know, the work that Abo Kutemba and all these other men organizations are doing to kind of like add our voice and perspective as women to that. So yeah, so that was that.
I cannot move on without just recognizing your bravery, because going in as a female director with a title of, you know, of Ubudoda, and then still the backlash, did you not feel a bit reserved and a bit nervous about, you know, just going into it?
Yeah, well, I did Amabele so that was enough backlash too. Yeah, no, I think I had already gone through how it might be like, but no, actually, maybe I wasn't listening to the backlash. You know, I think sometimes when you are in it and you know that There's something bigger than you, like another force. That's because when you're telling stories, it becomes bigger than yourself. There's actually really another force that is pushing it, you know, and especially when it's time, you know. So I think I didn't focus on that. Even if I heard anything, I was just like, oh, wow. And also because in Ingleba was already taken the biggest fall, you know. So I think I was in a good space.
You were just like, oh, well, it's just another day. Hello, critique. Okay, sharp. You just send me an SMS rather. Like, yeah.
And remember, I was not a big director, so I don't think anyone cared to actually really, you know, go into the story.
Actually, I want us to actually get into that conversation, you know, because there is this thing that content like that, content that is meaningful, that is less sensationalist, you know, is not as commercially successful. So when it comes to things like distribution for contents like that, how easy is that world to navigate? You know, broadcasters, streamers, and distributors, are they willing to come to the party when it is something that is less sensational?
Yes, I think because, I mean, all of these films that I've mentioned have been broadcasted by SABC and Mzansi Magic. So I think broadcasters are coming to the party. I mean, with SABC, it was back in 2006, you know, so, and I know that SABC even then was very much about, you know, those kind of stories, what's happening, not really like, not that they want non-commercial stories, they're still a business, but they wanted human stories about people, you know, stories about human condition. So I think the broadcasters do want that. They want to reflect our society. They want to reflect who we are. So it is there, but there could be more. Obviously, there's a lot of us now, and there's so much more like your television schools. Because when I started, there was no television school. I didn't know. I was PE, so I didn't know. And now there is a lot, you know, going on. And when I was starting out, it was media with a media workshop, you know, that was pushing us, and we were the first ones. So now there's a lot of us that are coming. So we need more spaces. And I think things could be better, you know, in terms of these stories flowing into broadcasters and be seen by a lot of people. And also the streamers, you know, the streaming companies, you know, we need also to have more of our own as Africans, you know, we need our own streaming platforms that understand us, that can, you know, can partner with us, and so that we can move Africa forward and move the world forward, and also to just share who we are in a broader space. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. You know, and when it comes to now where the content is placed, because I think that's also a big conversation that, you know, is being had, that most of this content is being placed in late prime. So, you know, maybe these documentaries will air at like 10 p.m. when the actual people that we should be reaching with content are more of the younger adults who wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards that. So it's more about marrying the message to what they are currently attracted to in terms of content. Do you think that that's being done enough, or are we still a bit, you know, old school with how we distribute the message?
As filmmakers, as
the industry, as, you know, consumers as well, because we are both at the end of the day.
I'll speak to filmmakers as a filmmaker, like to I think not enough, could be more. And I think, you know, we've over the years, we've spoken a lot about audience development and I've had a lot of conversations with some of the people who mentor me in the industry. And the one thing we'd always speak about is that when we make films as filmmakers, we're making films for the audience. we're not making films for our peers. And at some point, there is a part of filmmaking that kind of, you know, or where I'm coming from, I don't know the filmmakers, the new ones now, that, you know, you'd feel good when your peers are like, yo, wow, Nolita, yeah, you know, and everyone is at the film festival, and most of those people in the film festivals, you know, that high of, it's your peers.
Yeah.
You know, people who are going to buy, you know, and the real people you want to sit in that cinema or wherever or at home, you know, are the people, is the audience. So we should start thinking along those lines. I like what you said, that are we marrying with where the people are and people want to go, and, you know, and the market, and looking at the market you are making this for. It's very important.
I actually love that, because as filmmakers, and I'll include myself, and not just my world of film, we tend to have this thing of, what does my peer think? You know, because I'm pretty sure even after this, I'll probably do it without even realizing. I'll probably call one of my other presenter friends, like, okay, did you watch? So what did you think? Did I ask the right question at the right time? And I forget to just ask somebody who does not have an idea of what's going on, of what I'm going through. And I think we need to do a lot more of that.
Yes. You know what? So at some point in my life, for the first time in my adult life, and then I stayed with my aunt, like a full family setup, and they watched a lot of TV. And she said to me, you know, you guys are undermining us. And I was like, okay, yes, I kind of like have an idea of that, but what do you mean, you know, kind of. And then she's like, you guys, a person will be going on a trip and picking up a suitcase, and that suitcase has nothing. We can see the way they pick up that suitcase. It has nothing. Can we not, you guys talk about budgets, can we not hear about budgets you guys are talking about and start talking about the suitcase? Fill your laundry in that suitcase. And that doesn't...
At least put something in the suitcase, anything, even old scripts.
And she says, because we know how it feels like and what happens when a person picks up a suitcase. So we do not believe you guys. So there's also the issue of believability, you know, that comes with our stories and characters. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, it's really sad. I really would have loved for us to speak to Ms. Jackie Achilles, who is, of course, the commissioning editor for SABC when it comes to the drama department. However, ESCOM, just as they do, was not on our side. However, I'm pretty sure we will try and make a plan. We will try get maybe like another separate interview with her, because I would have loved to hear, you know, as a channel, as a broadcaster, how they handle the subject of gender-based violence and how they deal with it. But I think right now it's time for us to wrap things up. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Any final words, starting with you, Ms. Koza Fenton?
Final words. I watched a film, so I just want to share what I've watched. It's called A Better Man. And the synopsis of the film, and just to encourage us looking at different angles of telling the stories. So the synopsis reads as follows: illuminating a new paradigm for domestic violence prevention. A Better Man offers a fresh, nuanced look at healing and revelation that can happen for everyone involved when men take responsibility for their abuse. Yeah. So it's an interesting take. This couple goes on a journey together of healing. They're not together, but so all I'm saying is there's all these new, different and fresh angles as filmmakers that we can start digging and talking to people.
Digging and getting into.
Digging in, yeah, and talking to abantu abafana noButhembani and collaborate, you know, and create this.
Yes, you know, I would love to see a lot more of that, where the film production company actually works with a or an NGO that specializes in a certain subject. I think we will be able to deliver content that is more conscious and that is more accurate. and that has a better message, because then we're going to have a better understanding, even ourselves as filmmakers. So can we please do a lot more collaboration, Putemban?
Of course, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say that we need more collaboration, especially the filmmakers. They must involve the experts on the field, where they can be able to advise that in such a case, this usually happens, this happens. So yeah, we can reflect, the reality of what is happening on the ground, so that people, they can be able to believe, your stories. And then as well, I think more research as well is needed, where that's what I love about the stories we did with the learners. It was their stories, they wrote the stories based on what they see in their communities. So you need more of that, story that people can relate with, that reflects the reality. But we need to see more consequences, especially for the perpetrators in our films. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely love it, guys. Thank you so much. Nolita, is there any content that we can view online for you as a filmmaker? If anybody would maybe love to check out some of Creative Genius's work.
No.
Any streamers on YouTube?
No, not yet. We're still in development of such stuff. We'll let you know.
Let me know as soon as you drop, because I want to see each and every second of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Don't forget that tomorrow we do have the last and final day of the festival, of course. We are going to be screening. There will be a screening at 2 p.m. of A Handful of Ash. That's going to start at 2. And then it's going to be followed by In Search of America, Inshallah. And then a little bit later on at 4 p.m., we do, of course, have another panel session that includes some phenomenal speakers. And the conversation that's going to be had there is the impact. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do whatever you need to do on all those social medias and support the festival, because it is doing great work. And don't forget to share this with all your filmmaker friends, all your non-filmmaker friends, anybody and everybody, so that they can all join in the conversation and watch on their own time. That's the beauty of the internet. We can get everything on demand. On Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. And thank you so much for joining us.